All right, GMS students, we're going to be using the X-Tool laser engraver cutter machine. Actually, I'm lying. You're not going to use the machine. You're going to design something that the teacher is then going to cut on the machine. You may have already designed something like your name, the text with the letter of your name, or maybe your mom or your grandpa's name for your cutting board project in sixth grade, or maybe you did your name and the rules for the peg game, something like that. So you know a little bit about Xtool. But what we did on your projects was just engrave. In other words, kind of burning into the wood and leaving behind a mark, almost like printing on the wood. We can also use this machine to actually cut into the wood with the laser the way you would cut with a saw or a drill. And so we're going to be using both of those features on this project to make a kind of dog tag looking keychain. All right, so go to your computer, please. Look for Xtool Creative Space. It's the black X on the green background. You might have used this before to engrave your name or some words on the back of a wood project. When you get to the main page, I want you to click on New Project over here. And it should look like a page of graph paper, a brand new space where you can design on. We're not starting from a template like we might have in the past. So the first thing I'm going to do, instead of untitled, I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to call it Steve Patarini, first and last name, P3, name tag, keychain. So your first and last name, whatever period you have the class, and then name tag keychain, and you should see that up here. Yep, perfect. So now we need a shape for this keychain that we're going to make. So I'm going to click on Shapes here on the side. And I'm going to click here on this arrow because whenever I see an arrow there, it tells me there's more stuff. And I'm going to grab this thing that looks kind of like a square, but you might notice that the corners are rounded. So when I click on that, it gives me this square where the corners are rounded. I don't need to see this right now. So I'm just going to make that go away for the moment. And of course, I think you know by now that if it's got 4 arrows, you can move it. If it's got 2 arrows, you can change the size of it, right? 2 arrows changes the size, 4 arrows moves it around, right? But notice that when I change the size, this side and this side stay the same. That's what we call the aspect ratio. And right now it is locked. So I'm going to unlock it by clicking this bar right here. Okay. So it should have that little line through it. And now I can move it this way. I can move it this way. I can move it this way. But to be super precise, what I'm going to do is over here is I'm going to make the width. One problem some students ran into is they were trying to make their keychain the correct size. And of course, over here I have it 3 inches and by 1.5 inches high. They said, but Mr. Pat, ours is in millimeters over here, not in inches. So quick fix, go over here up to the X in the left top corner, click down, and you'll see settings. If you click on settings, it should let you change the unit. So if that were marked into millimeters, yes, you would only see being millimeters. I think it defaults to that, meaning it does that automatically. Somewhere along the way, I must have changed mine to inches. So do that, click on so that that's green, click out here, and then you should have inches over here. And hopefully that solves your problem. And actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse that. I'm going to make the width 3 and the height 1.5. There we go. That's much better. That kind of looks like a keychain. All right. Now, another thing I might do is down here in the bottom, I can increase the zoom so I can kind of see what I'm doing better. All right. So I've still got my guy here. I can move him around, center him in the page. I'm going to need a hole to put my keychain ring through. So while I'm here, I'm going to grab a circle. And you can see it's kind of up at the top of the page. I don't need to change the aspect ratio. I don't need it's locked right now. So as I make it smaller and smaller, that's great. But once again, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make this 0.2. And that should make both of them 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. And now I've got myself a nice little circle. And Xtool does this cool thing where it kind of finds the center for you, figuring you were hoping to put something in the center. And now I've got my hole and I've got the outline of my keychain. I'm actually going to cut these two shapes out of a piece of plywood. So I'm cutting this line here and I'm cutting this line here as though I were cutting this with a saw and drilling this with a drill press. So when I click on it and I drop down here, come on, I'm going to click on cut and drop that down. So if I click here and I go to cut, I'm going to go power 100, speed 12. And I have to select both of these shapes. That's the outline of the thing, right? So my power is 100 and my speed is 12. And that should make the laser strong enough to cut through a 1/4 inch of plywood and knock this hole out and cut that shape out from the sheet of plywood that I'm using, which is pretty cool. All right. Now, what I want to do next is engrave some letters. So I'm going to go to text, and you've probably done this before. And I'll just say Mr. Pat. And as you know, again, this thing's kind of in my way here. So if I click that, that goes away. Remember when we were doing our other projects, if we clicked over here where it says Lato, and then it lets me change all these, go into all these crazy scripts. Some of them are a little hard to read. Yeah, that one I don't know that I would recommend because it just looks kind of raggedy, right? That's too much. Mr. Pat Lato is actually pretty cool. I like that, Lifesavers. Okay. Oh, by the way, now I'm back to my 4 arrows, my 2 arrows. I'll shrink it down so that it fits, kind of center it there a little bit. And usually what I tell students to do is add something that's going to kind of reflect your personality or something like that. So if I click on shape here again over on this side, yeah, I could put a border on. I'm not going to bother. I don't know that I'm interested in plants. I suppose you could be into animals if you wanted to put like a little, I don't know, a little cute little hedgehog or a swan or a bunny rabbit on your thing. But typically, people have other hobbies. You could have a soccer ball here. You could put a kayak. In fact, that's kind of cool. So I'm going to bring my kayak over here. Oh my goodness, it's a little big. I'm going to shrink it down a bit. Maybe I will lock that aspect ratio so I can stretch it a little bit. Stretch my kayak and now move it over there. That's kind of cool. So I got my little kayak. I've got my name. By the way, this kayak shape and my initials or the letters of my name, I don't want to cut those all the way through the wood. So when I click on that, I'm going to click here where it says engrave. Instead of cut, engrave. Drop this guy down. And I want that to be a different power. 20, 200. And then I'll do it on the kayak too. Engrave, make sure it's on engrave. 20 and 200. Okay. Now, if you've already saved it with your last name, come back here and on the file, save as, make sure that you save it on the appropriate period number. When you put that flash drive in, you should see it. It should show up as removable disk D, USB D, okay? And I said I was in period 3, so I'm going to put it in there. Steve Patarini, P3, name tag keychain. I'm going to click save. And I'm going to tell my teacher, hey, teacher, I made a name tag. It's got my name on it. Oh, by the way, could you make a name tag for your mom or your grandmom or your coach or somebody like that? Make it put your coach's name on here and then put the soccer ball on or the basketball. That'd be pretty cool, right? Be a nice gift to give to them, an appreciation. Your music teacher, you got the music. So, look, there's a few things in here. You probably shouldn't use any of the gun images or any of the cocktails, things like that. Not everything is probably the most appropriate thing for school, which means if you choose that, guess what? We're not going to print it. And just because you're not being very responsible about doing that. All right. But if you have created your tag, let your teacher know. They will print it out for you. I guess they'll be engraving and cutting it. And then they'll give you a little keychain that you can take home, and with a little key ring on it, you can put it on your backpack, your musical instrument, put keys on it, for goodness sakes. It's a pretty cool thing.